Back in February, Kawasaki replaced the Z800 with this, the new Z900. And that was mainly down to those EU regulations. I'm here at P&H Motorcycles and they've let me borrow one for the day, so we're going to take it out into the Surrey Hills and see if it's any good. Let's take a quick look at where it all began. And back in the 70s, Kawasaki released the Z1, which was a 903cc engine, and at the time it was one of the most powerful Japanese four-cylinder four-stroke bikes. Fast forwarding 4 decades now, and the current Z range starts with the Z125, which unfortunately is not available in the UK, the Z250, the Z300, the Z650, this, the Z900, and the mummy of them all, the Z1000. This is another big important bike for Kawasaki, with over 200,000 units sold of the Z750 and the 800. It's got some big shoes to fill and it's really got to work for them. The engine is a 948cc inline 4-cylinder unit. It's the same engine as the Z1000, but it just has a smaller bore. It has 125 brake horsepower at 9,500 RPM, and the engine felt brilliant, smooth as silk. It had a sweet spot around 6,000 revs, and it starts to tail off around 10,000 revs. It has a 6-speed gearbox, and the first 5 gears have really short gear ratios. So 6th gear almost felt like an overdrive gear. My rule of thumb normally is the bigger the bike, the heavier the clutch. But with this one, it has the slip assist, which makes that clutch really light. It's also got a slipper clutch, and nowadays we all know what a slipper clutch does. The bike weighs 210 kilos, which is 21 kilos lighter than the Z800. So we have more bike, more power, and less weight. But I guess that's down to the new steel trellis frame, which actually looks beautiful and it gives it that H2R look. And one of the things that I noticed first about this bike was the handling and how light, how nimble. It just handled unbelievably well. And the only bike I've ever ridden close to it or compare it to is the GSX 750S that I test rode back in probably Spain or somewhere like that. I mean, it did rain there, but the handling of this bike compared to that is just a million miles away. This, you point it somewhere, you tell it to go somewhere, and it goes somewhere. I'd really like to take one of these out on the track and see what it could do. You can see the influence that the Ninja H2 has had on this bike, using the steel trellis frame, using the engine as part of the frame, which sometimes makes the bikes vibrate a lot, but with this one, I didn't pick up any of that. So they've taken all that technology that they've used and they've learned from the H2, and they've placed it on this bike, and I think they've done a tremendous job with it. Those pesky Euro 4 regulations have given us this exhaust, and I must admit Kawasaki haven't done a bad job with it at all. I mean, I've certainly seen worse exhausts out there, but this one's going to slip straight off and you're going to be able to find an aftermarket one that sounds a little bit better. But that said, this bike actually doesn't sound too bad. So if you were to keep the standard pipe, the most exciting noise comes from the air induction, and at about 6,000 or 7,000 revs you get this massive roar, and it kind of outweighs the sound of the exhaust. I kind of prefer that roar than I do the exhaust sound. So researching this bike, one thing I found out was that Kawasaki actually have a sound research department, which I guess is why the induction sound sounds so sweet. But I really don't know what to make of that. Do they have Hans Zimmer stood next to a bike listening to it, tuning it up? Nissin calipers on the front, we have twin 4-pot calipers with a 300mm pedal disc. The rear is a single pot Nissin caliper, and that has a 250mm pedal disc. The brakes work great, and one of the few rider aids that this bike has on it is obviously the ABS, which is kind of essential nowadays. Talking about rider aids, well, there aren't any. There's no toys whatsoever to play with, no engine remapping, no rider modes, no traction control, no nothing. But I kind of like the fact that it doesn't. If you want to stop the bike from spinning or sliding, it's all in the wrist. Let's look at the dash now. It's nice and neat, nice and tidy, but it does have a digital rev needle, which I don't think there's any need for it. It does have a gear indicator, which is nice, but I'd sooner see one of the old school analog rev needles on this thing. The seat height is 795mm, which is only 5mm taller than the Z650. And when you compare it to the Z800, it's almost 40mm shorter. That could be another one of the factors as to why this bike handles so well. The lower center of gravity and the fact that you sat in the bike as opposed to sitting on top of the bike. The tank's pretty high as well, so it makes you feel like like I said, you're sat in the bike. It's really, really narrow as well, which is going to suit a lot of smaller riders. Let's talk about style now, and it's something I know absolutely nothing about, but I like this bike. It comes from the Sagomi philosophy of styling, and it has a H2 feel all about it. It's like a mini H2. I love the steel trellis frame, especially in this colour. I love the tank, I love the headlights, slightly nicer than the Z1000. I just like the way it looks, and the only bike I can compare it to riding wise is the GSX 750S, and in terms of style, this one gets my vote. The bike comes in 3 different colours. This one is Pearl Mystic Grey. Where are the days gone when you used to call a bike black, blue or red? So let's take a look at the other bikes in the middleweight range, and they're classing this as a middleweight, but it's basically just 1000cc, so it's at the top end of the middleweight range. So we've got, as I said before, the GSX S750, which I must admit, if you're looking at a bike like the Z900, you're probably going to disregard because of the lack of power compared to this. Then you've got the MT09, which comes with a few more rider aids and is a little bit cheaper. And then you've got the Triumph Street Triple. It's a really hotly contested market. I personally think the Z900 is going to be at the forefront of it come the end of the year. It's a little more back to basic. That might put a few people off, but it certainly wouldn't put me off. I like the fact that it handles better than the majority of the middleweights out there. It's got a little more torque. I personally prefer this styling over the MT09, the Street Triple, or the GSX S750. I'm not just saying this because I'm here outside P&H Motorcycles and I'm sat in front of the Z900, but if I had enough money, that's the bike I'd get.